Like, I remember when the money wasn't there, forced me to say you 50, I got you. I gave my lawyer money and everything when I fight my case. I ain't got to get into all that, but bro made sure he made a way for me to be straight.
In this way, Lil Durk supported Jam until Jam betrayed him. Now that everything has changed, a new video of Jam pleading for his life has gone viral. People are asking whether this is the end of Jam because we know Durk doesn't tolerate disloyalty. It's honest and sincere. Let's take a closer look at what Jam is asking for. Before getting into the drama of the federal case and the reasons why people are calling for Jam's head, we need to look at the details that most people miss. Jam used to be one of Lil Durk's most devoted fighters, but he was the rat that destroyed the entire business. Durk is now pleading for his life because, if we know anything about him, he craves revenge. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most. But this was meant to be family, the kind of loyalty that the culture is based on. This isn't simply any random individual who is duped. Long before any of us knew who these cats were, Jam and Lil Durk had been friends since we were young. In a 2023 interview with DJ Jerry Jam, homies guys who grew up in the same neighborhoods and went through the same hardships, poverty, and violence that mold young men in these streets talked about how Durk was like a brother to them. They claimed that before Durk was even well known, he wrote music for neighborhood gatherings and block celebrations.
Like, I remember when the money wasn't there, forced me to say you 50, I got you.
When Jam was only 17 years old and barely legal in Chicago in 2010, life wasn't a joke. At the time, Durk was just another young Chicago musician seeking to make a name for himself as a rapper. They weren't thinking about record deals, federal cases, or anything like that. They were just neighbors watching out for each other and hoped to leave the area together. Years old, he was found guilty of attempting to kill someone and given a 12-year prison term. We won't get into the details of what happened because that's between him and the streets. What matters is what happened afterward. While they're homeboys behind bars for more than a decade, most people move on, make new friends, refocus their aspirations, and have shorter phone talks. Letters stop coming in. When Homie's career took off and he started earning real money and growing his company, things were different. Durk, nah. We're not just talking about keeping him on the books or giving him commissary money. We're talking about the kind of devotion that makes legends. He sat in the cell for the first time and never forgot it. That's how it is on the streets. The visits stop. During his 12-year campaign, Jam garnered backing from Lil Durk, which was completely unprecedented. Paying for legal bills was something new for Durk, and as you are all aware, good attorneys can be costly, particularly in cases as serious as attempted murder. While incarcerated, the majority of rappers refuse to even assist their own blood relatives.
Yeah, my lawyer money and everything when I fight my case. I ain't got to get into all that, but bro made sure.
Durk prepared a comprehensive welcome home package for Jam when he eventually exited the prison gates in February 2022. But the financial support was only the beginning. We're talking about the kind of homecoming that most the first Durk buying Jam a house, not just any house, but a location where Jam could rest, rebuild his life, and have some security as all that people dream about after he has served more than 10 years in prison. After that, he bought him a car, so the man Durk still didn't believe it was sufficient. Even if he could manage his business, live freely, and begin to reconstruct his life, this man gave Jam a welcome home gift of $50,000 in cash, more than most people would get. Durk loved his loyalty so much that when others saw him a year later, he just handed it up as if it were nothing.
He said, Jam get out that jam and give him 50, he ain't gotta ask again, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? He ain't gotta ask, bro.
This kind of dedication was so uncommon and sincere that Durk even made a musical allusion to it, particularly in King Von's song Back Again, in which he rapped, Jam, I handed him 50, so you don't need to ask again. Get out of that jam. Jam seemed to genuinely admire him, and Durk was so pleased with his ability to control his homeboy that he wrote a song about it for everyone to hear. After publicly praising Durk's devotion, he said, "Bro played his part, and for social, overplayed it. I love bro for that."
Bro, like, played his part for sure, like, overplayed it. I love bro for that.
They brought Jam into the F family as an artist and featured him on songs like No Complaints and Focus. In 2022 and 2023, Durk gave Jam a legitimate way to make money, build a career, and avoid jail time. Everything seemed to be going well. The man was back at home. He was getting better. He was a part of a successful organization. And he had the kind of devoted friend that what most homeless people don't realize is that this was meant to be the happy conclusion of a tale of true friendship enduring the worst. But all changed on October 24, 2024, when Lil Durk was arrested in Florida on federal murder charges, which carry a maximum penalty of life in prison rather than state or local criminal penalties. 5 additional people participated in a 2022 conspiracy against artist Quando Rondo that claimed the life of Rondo's cousin Savia Lou Pab Robinson. When the federal government gets involved in a case like this, they bring proof, recordings, and documentation, the kind of things that may bury you. But what left everyone on the streets asking was how in the hell they knew it. Much about FF's internal operations, Jam was the focus of attention after Durk was arrested, and it was said that he had been helping the police for years, allegedly wearing a wire to gather evidence against Durk and others. When the whispers began, people began to wonder who had been talking, who had been participating, who had been wearing wires, and who had been recording conversations. Hip-hop heavyweights such as DJ Academics, Wack 100, and Chicago rapper King Yalla began accusing Jam of these serious offenses, which weren't just the product of a few internet trolls. These individuals have connections, sources, and information that the general public does not. They do more than just make accusations.
You know, we learned a lot when all this came out, man. You know, there's been a lot of allegations, about people snitching. So the main person they're talking about snitching is OTF Jam.
The most damaging proof was a video that went viral on October 30th, 2024, which allegedly showed Jam feeling extremely nervous close to Durk. Scholars claimed that Jam had been wearing a wire since his 2022 release, while Wack 100 said that he flipped after being apprehended on a fresh guns charge. The theory states that Jam chose to make a deal with the devil rather than spend further time behind bars after he found himself in trouble. Once more, shortly after being released, the social media comments were harsh, analyzing his body language and saying things like, "Damn, they must not be able to read body language because he's moving hella weird." Many people thought this movie was The Smoking Gun because it showed a man who was obviously embarrassed and concealing something. They also conjectured that he was wearing recording equipment. They saw someone who might have been recording every interaction, conversation, and moment of trust for the federal government rather than the loyal friend he was supposed to be. The idea in the court files also seems to be supported by an indictment filed in a U.S. District Court in Los Angeles, which suggested that an F member had been acting as a confidential informant. Despite the lack of a formal name for Jam, these federal lawsuits, as everyone knows, use initials and code names to keep their sources safe, at least until the trial. The legal consequences of this supposed treachery were as horrible as the human betrayal. Wasn't just some random associate or individual from the organization's periphery. It was clearly family, the cat that Durk had embraced, supported, trusted, and included in his inner circle. If the allegations were accurate, Jam's chats with Durk were all betrayals. Imagine how chilly it must have been to spend 12 years pent up in your house. Every minute they shared together and every bit of information he was granted access to as a trusted member may have been captured on tape and provided to federal investigators after his release. The child treats you like a blood brother when He brings you home and you give him back by assisting federal investigators in gathering evidence against him on the streets. The boy restrains you in ways that are uncommon for most people. People were obsessively examining every bit of information, every rumor, and every theory of what truly transpired on social media. The response from the hip-hop community was exactly what one could anticipate in a society where snitching is viewed as worse than murder, and working with police authorities may result in lifelong blacklisting or worse. People can never forgive or forget this kind of betrayal. Most people had already decided that Jam was a rat, and rodents are not tolerated in this culture, even though some defended him by saying that the evidence was insufficient. Let me explain how far this rabbit hole goes. The data that began to surface was shocking, and the reactions on the street were even odd. Let's start by discussing how the federal government handled this problem, since once you start to understand their approach, you can see why people were so certain that they had an insider giving them information. The federal prosecution of Lil Durk was not about a single incident, but rather a large criminal corporation that used violence to conduct business. Details of the alleged incident were detailed. Weird down and insane. 5 men the feds claimed were connected to F-Traced and followed Quando Rondo around Los Angeles on August 19, 2022, as though they were seeking him. They pursued his black Cadillac Escalade with 2 other cars before capturing him at a gas station, firing at least 18 bullets, including from a fully automatic rifle. His relative was killed, but Wanda was unharmed. This is what had everyone wondered, how the feds knew so much about the coordination, planning, and consequences. A number of industry insiders claimed that they had a snitch in the crew, which is why they knew so much about what was purported to be a covert operation. Wack 100 didn't mince words when he explained what he thought was the real story. There's a guy named F Jam that was wired. Very ironic name. Jam got him in. The Jam, you'd better listen carefully when Wack 100 begins talking about federal cases and snitches, as he's been around long enough to know how these things work. Wacko added in the interview that he provided him with automobiles, gave him $50,000, and kept it real for 12 years. Ultimately, he reversed the chronology that Wack had previously described, adding that he had no criminal history, had never been a rat, and had never been involved in a guns case. It was laid out in a really dubious manner. He said that Jam had worn a wire constantly for 2 years between his 2022 release from prison and Durk's 2024 arrest. He was released in 2022, the year of the Quando event, after having been wearing a wire for the previous 2 years, from the ages of 22 to 24. Naturally, he was captivated by the situation right away. The welcome home celebration used $50,000 in cash to buy him cars and houses, welcoming him into the family even though he may have been keeping records for the federal government. Perhaps every meeting, every discussion, every moment of true brotherhood has been tainted by covert recording equipment. Jam's alleged assistance was motivated by basic self-preservation. According to Wack 100, Jam chose to flip rather than serve extra time in prison after discovering a new weapons case after being freed. Although records indicate that Jam was taken into custody in May 2023 on a warrant related to his prior case, the specifics of this new legal issue have mostly been kept under wraps. However, the issue with cats that have served their time is that they will do anything to avoid going back. 12 years in prison is a long time, and the thought of going back to your cell once you are released may make you do things you would not have otherwise thought to do. Eula King is used to the streets of Chicago, was better than most at examining some of the psychological aspects that could have played a role in Jam's bad decision.
OTF didn't help when OTF Jam baby mama was murdered while he was locked up, and it had him thinking the worst about that situation.
Everyone was left wondering about everything as a result of the plot's increased complexity. There were even rumors that Durk had given the order to kill Jam's baby mama. Durk was accused of the murder of Octavia Redmond, who was shot and died on July 19, 2024, after he reportedly found out that Jam was assisting a 15-year-old. Despite the lack of concrete evidence connecting Durk OTF to the crime, the timing raised the possibility that Jam's baby mama had been in touch. Jam allegedly approached Durk for legal assistance after learning about his new case, but if that's accurate, it could have been when Jam began to feel as if F wasn't truly family. King. These circumstances have the capacity to make even the closest of friends into adversaries. Claims YELLA.
I done did my last bid 4 years, but they ain't do shit. So certain, I felt the type of way when I knew you had money. Not meaning that I want to do some snake to you like that, but in my head, maybe, not no snitch, but I might want to do something.
The complexity of these street relationships is demonstrated by the fact that even when someone shows you love and dedication, you may begin to feel as though they aren't there for you when you need them the most. Growing hostility is a possibility, and in Jam's situation, it could have exposed him to federal pressure. However, prosecutors claim that the proof of Jam's alleged involvement went much beyond hearsay and conjecture, and that recordings from their informant were crucial in constructing the case against Durk. When a song purportedly recorded by Jam appeared with lyrics that seemed to make references to Durk and violence, it became even adder. Although no one was able to confirm the authenticity of the audio, other blogs claimed it was essentially an incriminating diss tune. Smirk is the voice you heard. What he said had some bullets behind it. We aren't here to tussle and only be. Rapping to kill me, a rapper, so they will have something to put in their mouths, was one of the supposed lyrics. Social media fans went bananas over these songs, interpreting them as proof that Jam was disloyal, regardless of whether this was true evidence or simply misinterpreted. According to posts, Jam allegedly snitched on Chicago rapper Lil Durk and other suspects in the King Von Get Back hit by releasing a song. Someone even spread false information on social media that Jam had been shot and died since the situation became so heated. Although the story turned out to be untrue, it demonstrated the level of anger and scrutiny Jam faced. The hood even turned the incident into memes and jokes, demonstrating how rapidly people believed and disseminated information of his passing. Social media users ridiculed Jam with remarks like, "Bro snitched on Dirt for a Big Mac and fries," after a video purportedly showed him eating McDonald's during a federal interrogation. The hip-hop community used humor and cultural commentary to process such betrayals, further isolating those who breaking the code. Meanwhile, for months following Durk's arrest, Jam's silence was making matters worse. He made no effort to verify or refute the rumors circulating about him, and his lack of public appearances and social media presence only fueled speculation about his whereabouts and true involvement in the case. Durk was in federal detention and could be sentenced to life in prison if found guilty. The evidence against him seemed to be strong, with many of the sources being insiders who had direct knowledge of how. You'll find when the discovery is made that I have no idea how the feds found us or put together their case. Therefore, I'm going to let the documents come out since they will reveal everything. In December 2024, F Jam finally came forward on Instagram stories, saying that he had not lied to Durk and that the truth would come out when the court paperwork was released. However, Jam didn't stop there. He launched an onslaught and began placing blame on others, including the "you don't expect someone who is said to be devoted to their family to respond that way." In essence, the same man who had spent 2 years discussing gang underscore is now claiming that Durk caused his own legal issues. To put it another way, the one who had given him all that loyalty effectively threw Durk under the bus by asserting that if he didn't want to be implicated, he shouldn't have visited the crime scene. The most significant aspect of Jam's statement was his promise that, upon the release of the legal discovery documents, that would demonstrate his innocence and reveal the identity of the person who genuinely provided the feds with their information. In other words, he was essentially mending fences with everyone, making them feel as though they had been deceived and abandoned by the entire organization. This bold assertion placed everything on a time frame. Either he would be vindicated, or he would be further buried in the streets as a result of those documents. When the prosecution eliminated references to Durk's song lyrics from a superseding indictment in May 2025, they started to exhibit signs of weakness. As everyone awaited the release of the promised records, certain interesting developments in Durk's case started to lend credence to some of Jam's assertions. Others began to question whether the account was more nuanced than it initially seemed, while others viewed Jam's confession as a desperate attempt by a guilty man to transfer blame and raise reasonable doubt. Although the song was actually recorded 7 months before the incident, Durk's legal team had been alleging that prosecutors had effectively misled the grand jury by citing Jackie Boy and Wonderful Wayne lyrics as evidence. This proved that the prosecution's case might not be as solid as they had first stated, which made it noteworthy. There were considerable concerns about what other aspects of their case might be, based on poor foundations, if they were prepared to discard evidence that had been essential to their initial presentation. The government's case suffers when scholarly experts fault federal prosecutors for being careless. The prosecution's presentation of their case in the supplemental indictment they filed underwent substantial revisions, which legal analysts found to be the most intriguing development. Prosecutors were treating artistic expression like literal confessions without conducting adequate fact-checking, he argued, calling the prosecution's use of Durk's lyrics in court cases extremely careless. Deleted paragraph 9 from the original accusations. Waco claims that the payment system for murder for hire, which was specifically mentioned in paragraph 9 of the initial indictment, has been eliminated. According to the paragraph, defendant Wilson would, at defendant Banks' instruction, pay the monetary reward or bounty and/or arrange for payment to be made for the murder of Sr., also known as Lil Pob, on behalf of co-conspirators. The significance of this elimination was that it suggested that whatever to understand why this entire affair is so important in hip-hop culture, we must examine past instances where artist crews supposedly turned against them. It is possible that the federal government's first assertion that Durk paid for the assassination was not as reliable as they initially believed. There has been betrayal of this kind before, and the results are invariably catastrophic. The most well-known instance was 6ix9ine's connection with the 9 Trey Gangster Bloods, when he assisted with the prosecution by testifying against his old companions after having a complete change of heart following his RICO charges. For instance, Gunner had to attest in court that YSL is a gang and a music label. And you have direct information that YSL members or affiliates have committed crimes in support of the code. When he accepted an offer plea in December 2022, a living illustration of what happens when you breach the code, 6ix9ine is a lifelong exile in the hip-hop culture as a result of his open and explicit participation. Then there was the YSL RICO case involving Gunna, which demonstrated how even legitimate actions can be perceived as snitching by the culture.
YSL is a music label and a gang, and you have personal knowledge that members or associates of YSL have committed crimes in furtherance of the gang. Yes, ma'am.
Prominent rappers Lil Durk, Lil Baby, Meek Mill, and Polo G unfollowed Gunna on social media and in the hip-hop world, despite his assertions that he wasn't working with them. Considered him to be a snitch, severely damaged his career, and is now attempting to mend his social status. However, neither of these circumstances applied to the F-Jam instance. Unlike Gunna, who made admissions in court as part of a formal plea deal, there was no obvious collaboration or publicly available proof that anybody could connect to, unlike the 6ix9ine. Since the accusations against Jam were primarily based on conjecture and circumstantial evidence, the streets persisted in denouncing him in spite of the lack of hard evidence. As soon as the allegations against Jam began to surface, many people took them at face value because society is already wary of anyone who may assist law authorities. Even though there were 20,000 witnesses and more than 230 gigabytes of digital evidence. Durk's trial was postponed until October 2025, which further compounded the situation. Reports in the form of pages, this implied that while all of this legal drama was going on, the discovery documents that Jam said would vindicate his name might not be made public for months or perhaps years. The murder of his baby mom and the snitching accusations cast doubt on his whereabouts, and there were whispers that he was fleeing Chicago for his own safety. Target from a variety of perspectives, the case demonstrates the precarious situation that members of street-oriented hip-hop culture are in, and its ramifications extend far beyond the individuals concerned. Themselves in a situation where people had to choose between survival and loyalty. And Yella provided a logical explanation of the psychology underlying these circumstances.
And got images. My OTF try to, you see, you know the GD, like, we don't give a, I ain't got no filter. You do something, I'm calling you out for it. That's what it is. That's how we was raised anyway. Yep. Try to keep they together so they won't look bad.
Hip-hop's portrayal of unwavering allegiance isn't always consistent with the reality of serving decades in federal prison. This comment demonstrates how the need to uphold one's reputation and street cred may sometimes conflict with the difficult choices locals must face when the federal government intervenes. Known for speaking up, Charleston White offered his usual, candid assessment of the circumstances.
Nobody laughing at Durk like they were laughing at me when I went to jail. Lord have mercy. So ain't nobody laughing at Durk. Now it ain't funny. Now your favorite rapper go to jail and look like he got a no bond like me.
White's remarks were always contentious, but they were a part of a larger discussion in hip-hop culture about the ramifications of combining mainstream celebrity with street life and the responsibility that comes with having power. There are still a number of important questions, including whether the discovery materials Jam promised would truly establish his innocence or uncover fresh, highly damaging evidence, whether the resources of the federal government would be sufficient to refute the prosecution's case, and whether Durk's legal team will be able to finally, what will all of this imply for the fraternity and loyalty that have been at the core of hip-hop since its inception. The harm to relationships and reputations has already been done, regardless of how the judicial proceedings turn out. Accusations and suspicions that may never be fully cleared have shattered the relationship between Durk and Jam, which was previously praised as an illustration of steadfast loyalty and true brotherhood. Their connection has been destroyed because of the trust that gave it such significance.